Good morning. Hope you're doing well on this Sunday morning. We're going to be looking again at the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to be looking next couple weeks up to Palm Sunday on the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to be in chapter 6 today, verses 19 through 24. As we start our time, let's pray. Dear Lord, I ask you to help us today as we look at your word, to have your spirit move in our lives and to guide us and shape us as we look at your word. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, just a reminder. This is sort of this normal reminder at this point. When we look at the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is speaking in a lot of these little sections we're looking at in a bigger sermon, a bigger context, 5, 6, and 7, or one sermon here that we see. And so it's wise to look at these and understand that there's an overarching theme, there's an overarching understanding that Jesus is talking about the kingdom versus the world, or the world's way and the kingdom's way, or this is how the kingdom is versus how we perceive things elsewhere. So it's just important to remember that kind of stuff as we look at this, because sometimes we can forget that in the midst of this, the overarching thing. So we're going to get right into this. We're going to read the verses together, and then we're going to look at them. So it's Matthew chapter 6, starting in verse 19. Hear the word of the Lord. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, your heart will also be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. There's some great images here. Some great images in this passage is that I just love. I just love when Jesus speaks in ways that you could take these images out of it and see what he's saying in a way that's powerful and cool. The first one is, of course, the treasures. He does these images of treasure, and for me, I can't help but think of the image of like a throne room, or not a throne room, but the treasury of some king, where he has this massive number of chests and all this stuff of gold and stuff like that. You can see all those cartoon movies like Aladdin and all those others, where they'll have this big cave where there's treasures everywhere, or there's the pirate treasure and all this stuff. And I can't help but think of that image. It's full of treasures, full of all this stuff, and versus this idea of something else. So I see that. And the second image, the image of an eye as a lamp. We see, and earlier in the chapter where he talks about we're a city on a hill, a light that can't be hidden, all these things. The eye is the lamp. This image and thinking about your eye and thinking about what you see. I mean, we look into people's souls. We feel like we look in their souls. You look at an eye and they feel piercing. They feel all this stuff. So we see there's power or just this imagery of the eye as a lamp. I mean, it's a great image, right? And then the last one here, the master, you can't serve two masters. And I've seen images. I've seen so many times. So the one thing that first comes to my mind is this guy standing there, and there's a dog, and there's two people, and they're like, which one will the dog listen to, right? Will listen to the wife or the husband and stuff like that, or the kid or the adult. Or you put food down and the master's like, is it going to listen? Or you think about this idea of you have to choose between work and family and all these things, where this image of the two masters, the dividedness, where you have two people pulling each hand and you're like, which way do I go? Who do I serve? And stuff like that. The images are great. They paint these great pictures that I think we can see, and we like, and there's these different images and stuff like that. Um, it's great, but there's an issue behind all these great ideas, and it's not always something we really want to deal with, right? Personally, I mean, we could talk about serving two masters and all this stuff, like this theological or hype, philosophy of all this stuff, and like, oh, well, is this right or is this acceptable? So we can think about those things and be like, okay, I can deal with that, or we could sit down and say the principle of where you build your treasures and all stuff, and what kind of person you are. Are you a greedy person? Are you, we call them, stingy people, or tightwads, or all these different terms we use. And so we look at this stuff, and we can describe the principles and all this stuff. And we can look at people and says, well, they're evil, their eyes and stuff. But we don't really want to deal with this personally, right? I mean, we want to listen to the stuff out there, but they're dealing with it personally is not something we want. And so when we read this passage, we can talk about it very strongly when it's not dealing with us. But as soon as it starts dealing with us, we start to want to soften the language. And we want to soften the language so that we can get away with it. So we think it's acceptable. And this is where I feel bad, because I feel like even in the church we soften the language because we don't want to deal with it. I mean, there's churches out there that build these massive buildings, right? And they're like, is that treasure on earth or treasure in heaven? And so it's like, and so you don't want to deal with this. You're like, oh, well, this is this or this is that, right? So we change the structure, we change all this stuff, and we don't want to do it. So we can see the extreme in others, but we don't want to see it in us. And so this is one of those passages that we start connecting it to others and says, okay, well, Jesus is speaking and this overarching thing, not literal or something like that. So it's, well, this means this means that, but I don't have a problem with this or that. So it creates this whole thing. And so it's a problem. We don't want to deal with it, right? You just don't want to deal with it. It's pretty simple. But this is one of those problems that I think where part of the reason why Jesus makes a statement in chapter 7, I think comes out of the ignorance or the ignoring of this statement here in 6, and that is, he says this in 7:21. It says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of the Father who is in heaven. See, this for me is one of those things, we have a lot of people that want to claim that they follow Christ, that he's their Lord, that don't necessarily want to follow him internally. It's an outward example. We make everything look good. Even Jesus argues about the Pharisees and says, they're whitewashed tombs and stuff like that, where they look good on the outside, but they're just a tomb. They're dead on the inside. And so we do this. And the treasure thing, the eyes and which master you serve sort of becomes that one of those things, And we have a lot of words to justify these. We have a lot of thoughts that will justify these. Now, the three images again, remember? Treasure, eyes, and who our master is. So we're going to look at these, each one really quick. So the first one is treasures. We're going to read it again to you. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where moth and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. Now, this is the easy one of these three because, as I mentioned earlier, treasures, we normally think of these things of gold and silver and gems, like, the pirate's treasure, the big chest where it opens up and there's gold blooms or whatever you want to call them, and there's this massive things of coins and stuff like that. When I was a kid, I thought of, when you think of treasure, I thought of Scrooge McDuck's big, and the cartoons where he had this big bank thing where it was full of coins and he would swim in it and stuff. This crazy idea of wealth that doesn't seem even possible for anyone like us. It doesn't seem like it's just even realistic. And so, like, I don't deal with that. I mean, I might have some money or something, but this isn't about me because I don't have this. And the other side of this is storing up treasures from heaven. It's this idea of the crown, right? You get a crown, you get to heaven, you put a crown, gets put on your head about, what you've done. And we all lay those down at God, Jesus' feet or whatever. But, and those crowns come from the good deeds you've done, the good things you've done. So we feel like, oh, I'm a good person, I'm good deeds, so I'm doing the right thing, right? So, but the reality is this translation, some of the translations say moth and rust destroy, but rust really doesn't destroy gold and gems. It doesn't do that. And a better way of translating it anyway is the way it's here. It's moths or vermin, and then another one was be worms in the midst of this. So they don't really go after metal or gems and gold. So there's something else they go after. So we a lot of times take this to the extreme to try to remove us from affecting us. We say, oh, he's saying the extreme. He doesn't really mean this to us. And see, we do that, right? We will soften the text to give us a little bit more leeway to do what we want, or we'll make it an extreme so that we don't fall under the umbrella of it being an issue, right? So, but the reality is moth, vermin, worms, even rust, they destroy things that are not just like golds and gems. They destroy everyday things. They'll destroy your clothes, like mothballs and all that other stuff you put in your clothes or whatever. It'll come in and they'll eat your cloth, your clothes, destroy your yards, your homes, bugs, vermin, all this stuff. Everyday things. I mean, Jesus didn't have plastic in his day, but I think you understand this idea. He's talking about treasures, not in the sense of a king, but he's talking in a common sense. He wasn't dealing with elite folks at this place. He wasn't like there was not all these massive kings. He was in Judea, the oppressed. I mean, he was in Israel or Judea and Galilee area when he said these things. He's in Galilee, but he's not talking to a crowd of people that had like extreme wealth. He's talking to people that were, really honestly poor. And so when he's saying this stuff about treasures, he's not thinking about this extreme. He's saying it to a group of people that needed to, understand that it's not about storing up things here, right? It's common folks. But we take this that says, oh, well, I'm not that. I don't do that. But this is the reality is, well, what is your treasure? What is your treasure? What do you treasure? Are you using the things in this world, the things that you have for God's benefit or for his? See, we always try to argue with the treasure thing. We argue it's like, well, I'm just being a good steward. I'm being safe and all this stuff. But do you serve that? Do you serve the treasure that you get? We bought a house, I don't know, about 6-9 months ago. And there's a lot of debate in our family, me and my wife, about buying a house, because it's like, okay, do we need a house? And the answer is sort of. What is the value? We had a place, but we wanted our own place. So is that storing up treasures? But we wanted a place where we could entertain, show hospitality to people in the church. Last night for me, or Friday night, we had the teens over. I had a few kids over, and we were playing games, and we're just good time. But we wanted a place where we could do that, right? And we were able to have the kids over playing really loud games, but the kids were sleeping because they didn't hear it, because where we were in the house, you couldn't hear it. And so that was, that's beneficial for us. And so, so you have to sit there and look at it. It's like, okay, well, is that a treasure? Am I storing up treasures on earth, or am I storing up treasures in heaven? And there's the debate. And I think we wise to understand of what do you use the things you have on this earth for. See, Jesus's words, he says storing up, like creating um, a war chest. That's why I think the image of the chest with all the gold and stuff matters, because you put all your stuff in that chest and you set it in a closet. You don't do anything with it. It just sits there. There's no purpose. And then we do that. When we do that, we're storing up here, and we miss it. We miss it because God gave us creation. God gave us money. God gave us wealth for to use it for His glory, to use it for His purposes, which in turn causes us to store treasures in heaven. Well, these are connected, these three different images. So let's move to the second one. Second image that Jesus uses in this passage comes from verse 22. Let's hear it. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? The reality is, when we see this, we can look healthy, right? We can think we're healthy because health is connected to a lot of times in our lives this right behavior, right attitude. We're healthy in our financial giving and all these things. So we have the right spending, right behavior with our money. Our heart isn't always heavy. We feel at peace somewhat with what we're doing. We're good. We take care of our life. Our body, we're healthy. We eat the right kind of foods and stuff like that. And so we feel like we're healthy. And so we're like, okay, we're good, right? This is where this verse, we have a tendency to have problems because of things like this. This is where I think this is the whole place where we go back and we want to soften the verses. And this happens within not just, as a pastor, but it happens within the church as a larger group. If you go back and read the King James Version of this, which I grew up in a church with the King James Version, the Bible, it's a harder version to read. But sometimes that translation got things more right than this one does. And it says things one way. I mean, this is why I always try to encourage you to read multiple versions of Scripture. It's always a good idea, so you can see the words that are hard are translated differently. And so you start to say, okay, well, what does that really mean? Because sometimes, like the word healthy in this passage, it would be easy for you just to read it and be like, okay, healthy is okay. The eye is healthy. Okay, well, I don't, is that a literal word, or is it, we don't know if it's deeper than that, because we have to see where, okay, there's another version that says something else. So maybe this word is something we need to really look at and try to really get the depth of what it means. And so here's the same verse 22 from the King James Version. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. So this version, it'll literally say single versus healthy. So now healthy, I've already said this already a little bit. Healthy is this like easy thing where we look at health and think of like well-being and all these things and stuff. Single will make us think, what is this? Our eye is single. What is that? What does that mean? I mean, what is single mean? Well, what about the eye being single-minded, or single-focused, or undivided? Connecting this to the other passages, it's not divided between two masters. mean, Jesus' next statement, if we read that, it says, no one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money or mammon. The other day, this was my son Rowan. He was getting up like normal mornings and stuff like that, but we're getting ready to go to daycares and work and all that stuff in the morning, and he just didn't want to go, and he was sad and stuff. It's normally not a problem. Normally he's just like, I want to go see the school buses, I want to go on the ride and stuff, because I take him to school or take him to daycare, and no big deal. But Friday he wanted his mom. He's like, I want mommy, and he just wanted to stay with mommy, and it was just so clear he wanted mommy. Get in the car, he still wants mommy, he just wants to be with mommy, and it was just like his focus was so directed there. And then the previous day, I had a Bible study, and so I left before he even got home for the night. I was back at the church, and I was just focused. He was like, where's daddy? I want to see daddy, I want to see daddy, I want to see daddy, and all this stuff. And he was so focused. And so there's a point sometimes you look at it, he's like, he feels divided. One day he wants me, one day he wants her, one moment he wants her, one moment he wants me, or whatever. Sometimes he wants the dogs, which I think is funny, but or his sister. But the reality is, at each moment when he wants something, his moment, his thoughts, and his mind is completely singularly focused, right? It's completely focused towards one thing. And I think we do this with God. We follow that same example. We do this. We completely desire him at one moment. Maybe when you're watching this, you're literally thinking about him completely, and this is what is God. We get to this place where he is our focus, and then the next moment we push him aside, or we set him aside. We wake up in the morning, we pray, and it's like, okay, I've done that. Now let me go to the rest of my day. And he becomes the seasoning on our day, or a part or an element of our day, and stuff like that. And we have these multiple treasures, multiple focuses, and we feel like we've fulfilled the I is healthy statement because we are balanced in life. We need balance, and the world tells you need balance. You need to have, you live good, this, and God is an element. It's like religion is an element of life. It isn't life itself, or this and stuff like that. But this is a problem because he's using the term light and darkness, which the reality is, this is the same terms that are used in scripture over and over again, that God is light. And if we have light, it's from him. Everything else is darkness. Everything else is darkness. My son sees my wife and or his mom, and is all happy with her. But what he sees in her that makes him happy is the light that is reflected on her from God. The light we see in others, the light we see in things in creation that is great, is God's light reflected off of those things. One of the things that I think we miss, and we always look at this and we don't understand that in those days and their understanding, which they had a different understanding of the world, is they believed that the lights, the source of light, came from the eye, and that the eye would be like flashlights, and so the eye would be where light comes out of, not the other way, that the light that you have would be seen out of your eye. And so this is one of those things that, a lot of times we don't connect, or we don't understand that we think healthy light and all this stuff is balance. For following God, if we're balanced, and that it's okay to have multiple treasures, multiple things, and just balance, right? Balance all the time. But Jesus is calling us to undividedness, singular. So, have your treasures in heaven. If we look at treasures, if we remember who came before us, what did they create or build is who we look at. I look at a lot of history stuff, right? And I look at the stories that came before. This week I was looking at a video about World War II, about these soldiers and stuff like that. And it wasn't their wealth or any of their stuff. We don't care about stuff. We cared about who they were as individuals, their character, their actions. They mattered, their family, their children, their spouses, their connection to others, their connection with how they acted, what they made or created. We very rarely care about how much money they had or what they ate, their possessions, or how they interacted with different things. We don't care about those kind of things. We don't focus on the junk that they have, the stuff. It doesn't matter their bank account. I mean, you see all these videos, these shows where they'll sit there and have someone die, and they'll have the estate and stuff like that. And one of my neighbors, well, not close neighbor, but a far neighbor that I didn't know, I hadn't met them. They were probably 3 or 4 blocks that way from me, but I drive by their house. And they had an estate sale, and you could see all their stuff on the road that wasn't sold. There was couches and all these things, and I'm like, they only have value to the person that has them. All these possessions. I mean, how often? Most of the time when people die, what do you do with their clothes? You get rid of it. You either throw it away or give it to a Salvation Army or Goodwill or something like that. They're gone. You don't keep it. It doesn't hold the things that and a lot of times that stuff just gets thrown away. What holds the purpose is a tool or pots and pans, but they're things that can do something. The things that have value are things that can do something. The rest of it disappears so quickly. And this is sort of how it is, possessions and all this stuff, they have value when they can do something. And we have a tendency to try to mess up with all this stuff, what Jesus says. We don't want to acknowledge that we've been storing up treasures that we like. I've watched people, and you might feel convicted of this, and this is not, well, if it convicts you, it convicts you. I've been over to people's homes and I've look at their movie collections. And I look at their movie collections and I'm seeing like hundreds of thousands of movies, and it's like, why? Or other things like that. I have a baseball card collection, but I haven't, I collected them when I was a kid for fun, but I haven't collected any in, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years. I have them. I kept them. I didn't throw them away, but they're in a closet. They're not drastic, but I don't put them on display, and I don't really talk about it too much. I have them because I was a kid. I was a teenager when I collected them, and then because I loved baseball, but they don't serve a purpose for me. I think of it as like, okay, I'll keep them and then I'll sell them so that my kids can go to college if they're worth anything. But we store up treasures and we do these things, and the treasure becomes our focus, and then we get divided. I look at all this stuff. I look at this whole thing where these 3 passages, and it's so easy for us to try to justify, and I worry even as I speak that I'm justifying things. And I say that because this is this constant battle we all have, and so you're like, well, am I justifying? Am I being honest? Am I being open? What am I following Jesus's words here, or am I discounting Jesus's words? And this is where we have this desire to create safety in our lives and create a network and all this stuff. We want to have money for retirement. We want this. We want all these things. And so we create this stuff, and we're like, well, I'm trying to protect myself. I'm trying to do this. And then we see stories where Jesus tells parables of men building new barns, and he's going to die that night and doesn't know his life's going to be taken, and he's building new barns because of the harvest, and it doesn't even know. And it's like, store up treasures in heaven, not on earth. And it's like, okay, so we shouldn't build retirement? And they're like, well, no. And then, is it bad to have money? I mean, what about our homes? So do we have this? So we question all this, and we question it. And this is a trick. Okay. I don't know if you understand. This is all a big, big trick. And it's a trick because we're being pitted against God. We're being pitted against God in these conversations. And so what happens is we're like, okay, well, I have this stuff now. And then we start debating and we want to soften the language so we're okay, but then we don't want to acknowledge the truth and all these things. So it becomes a mess. But here's the thing. This is why I brought up this whole healthy and single thing in the middle of this. Is because he tells you to store up treasures in heaven. And you're like, well, how do you do that? He tells us not to serve two masters. And I'm like, well, what is my master? I mean, I could sort of, how do I know what is mastering me? I mean, I can sort of see it sometimes. It's like, okay, from my job, what am I saying no to? What am I saying yes to? And so you sort of can see some stuff, right? But there's this place where it's like all this stuff is like difficult. And this is where it goes back to the eye. It goes back to the statement of healthy and single, where I think that change matters the most. Because is your eye single, singularly focused, undivided? See, this is what the call of holiness is, a call to be focused on God alone. Not focused on wealth here, but to focus on God. When we live a life focused singularly on Him, the other things sort of balance out. See, then there's balance there. And see, balance is okay. It's good when the balance comes from God's leading. When we try to create the balance, it means that we are the Lord of the balance instead of Him being the Lord of the balance in our life. It's okay to have possessions. It's okay to have things that you can treasure. It's okay to have multiple directions and stuff in your life if your focus is singularly on Christ, on the light. So, how do we move forward with all this stuff? It's very simple, honestly. Is God your focus? Are you running your finances through God? I mean, it says, like, how does my finances match my faith? How does what I treasure match God? What is all the stuff I have? How does this benefit my faith in God? And if you start saying, well, it doesn't benefit God. And then you need to start praying and saying, okay, well, what do I need to do to make it benefit God? Some of us at certain points need to purge things in our life. We need to sell things. We need to give to the poor. We need to give to missions. We need to give to the church. We need to do things intentionally to change this structure. Sometimes we also have to look at the things as, okay, well, I have this for this purpose. I have a wood shop so I can make things to benefit others, right? I have these resources so that I can help others. Is having collections a bad thing? No. If the collection becomes your singular focus, is it a bad thing? Yes. If Christ is your singular focus, the other things are not a problem. Jesus tells us to have a Sabbath. Jesus wants us to enjoy life. Jesus made the beauty of creation for us. And that's not the problem. The problem is when we sit there and miss the fact is that we need a singular focus on Him. So, I've talked a long time, but I would encourage you, again, to look at your life and intentionally says, what am I focused on? Am I focused on Him? Is He my master? Or am I playing the game where I'm going to be devoted to one and despise the other? Most of the time when that happens, you'll despise God because you feel like he leads you to places of shame and leads you to places that you feel guilty of the things. And so you don't go to church, you don't do this, you don't do that because you don't want to deal with that. And you become connected to the other. But to solve that, we need to start with our focus on God and understand he has to be the center. He has to be your master. If you're going to be successful, if you're going to be connected to him, if he's going to say, Lord, Lord, and when you say Lord, Lord to him and he says, well done, good and faithful servant, it's all connected to him being your true Lord, not just one of the options on the table. May God bless you, and may he keep you, and may he become the center of your life, and the center of your focus, and the center of your eye. Go in peace.